Imagine a candidate walks into your hospital, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're applying to be the new lead neurosurgeon.
Okay. High stakes job.
Very high stakes. But instead of showing you their medical degree or, their residency credentials or even their operative outcomes, they just hand you a piece of paper proving that they hold the all-time high score in the board game operation.
Oh, wow. You mean the game with the little plastic tweezers and the buzzing red nose?
Exactly. That exact game. And the candidate looks you dead in the eye and says, look, I extracted the plastic funny bone 1,000 times in a row without ever touching the metal sides. I am perfect.
Right.
Now, would you let that person operate on a living, breathing human being?
I mean, absolutely not. It's an absurd proposition.
It is absurd, and yet, welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Because as we are going to show you today, grading a surgeon based on a children's board game it's shockingly close to how the tech industry is currently evaluating life and dead medical artificial intelligence.
Yeah, which is exactly why we need to sort of change our perspective for this discussion today. We aren't just reading the news, we are putting on a very specific set of hats for you.
Right. We are stepping into the shoes of clinical quality assurance auditors.
Yes.
Think of us as the methodical compliance-first inspectors who look at safety-critical systems. Things like aerospace software or nuclear grid controls, and in this case, medical algorithms.
Exactly.
And we're asking one fundamental question. Does this actually work when human lives are on the line?
Yeah.
We aren't here to just marvel at shiny new tech. We are here to audit it.
And the material we're auditing today is the newly released Stanford AI Index report for 2026. Specifically, we're diving deep into the chapter on medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It's this massive, comprehensive look at where AI currently stands in the healthcare landscape. And we're also bringing in the inaugural State of Clinical AI report, which was published in January 2026 by the Stanford-Harvard Arise Network.
Right, so a ton of data.
A ton. And we're taking all this data and applying a strict, completely unforgiving QA lens to it.
Because our mission for this deep dive is to uncover what appears to be a massive, honestly terrifying discrepancy between AI's dazzling performance on medical exams and its actual measurable utility in a messy, real-world hospital environment.
Yeah.
We are going to guide you through something called the synthetic validation crisis.
And, the stakes really couldn't be higher here. I mean, in standard software quality assurance, a bug might mean your food delivery app crashes, right?
Oh.
Or maybe a marketing email gets delayed.
Annoying, but fine.
Right. But in clinical quality assurance, a bug means a missed pancreatic tumor, or a fatal drug interaction, or like a delayed diagnosis of sepsis in a pediatric ward.
It's life or death. So let's look at the headlines that have been dominating the news cycle lately, the ones that suggest we have essentially, solved medicine.
Yeah, the hype is everywhere.
It really is. If you look at the top-line benchmark numbers in the Stanford report, the isolated cognitive evaluations of these frontier models are, they're staggering.
They really are. But to understand the illusion of these exam performances, we have to look really closely at the data. Let's take OpenAI's O1 preview reasoning model, for example.
Okay.
The numbers jump right off the page. They tested this model on complex clinical vignettes from the New England Journal of Medicine.
Let's actually pause right there, because for you listening, if you aren't in the medical field, a clinical vignette from the New England Journal of Medicine, the NEJM, it's not a basic trivia question. It's not like, what is the powerhouse of the cell?
Oh, not at all. No, these are clinico-pathological conferences. They are notoriously difficult, multi-layered diagnostic puzzles.
Right.
They are specifically designed and published to stump the absolute best, most seasoned doctors in the world. They basically represent the apex of medical mystery.
I want to really ground this for everyone. A vignette like this, it usually reads something like, a 54-year-old male presents with 3 weeks of progressively worsening dyspnea, dry cough, and a low-grade fever. His medical history includes rheumatoid arthritis treated with methotrexate.
Classic setup.
Right, and then it goes on. Initial vitals show a heart rate of 110, respiratory rate of 24. Labs reveal a mildly elevated white blood cell count, but a comprehensive metabolic panel is otherwise unremarkable. A chest radiograph shows bilateral ground glass opacities. And honestly, it goes on for pages like that, detailing obscure lab tests and incredibly complex histories.
Exactly. And from that mountain of information, the doctor has to formulate what we call a differential diagnosis.
Let's unpack that term, differential diagnosis,
Yeah.
because it's really central to this whole audit today.
Yeah, think of the differential diagnosis as the Sherlock Holmes part of medicine. It's a formalized list of every possible disease or condition that could reasonably explain the patient's symptoms, and it's ranked by probability and urgency.
So it's not just like picking one single answer.
No, not at all. It's weighing a dozen conflicting possibilities. Like in your example, is it a typical bacterial pneumonia? Is it methotrexate-induced pneumonitis from his arthritis drug? Or is it maybe an atypical fungal infection? The doctor has to build this entire list in their head.
And according to the Stanford report, the OpenAI O1 preview model hit an astonishing 78% accuracy, including the correct diagnosis in its differential for these NEJM cases.
Which is incredible, honestly. But where it gets truly wild is on what we call management reasoning.
Right, because coming up with a list of possibilities is really only step one.
Precisely. Management reasoning is the next, much harder step. It's deciding what to actually do with the patient based on that differential.
Like the treatment plan.
Exactly. Do we order a CT scan? Do we start broad-spectrum antibiotics right now? Or do we wait for a blood culture to come back? Do we admit them to the ICU or send them home with an inhaler? On these management reasoning cases, the AI scored a median of 86%.
Wow. 86%. And what did the human physicians like, the actual practicing experts, score on those exact same management reasoning cases?
A mere 34%.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And it is vital to note that this 34% was achieved with conventional resources available to them. I mean, they could look things up.
Okay, that is a staggering gap. 86% for the machine, 34% for the human experts. And it's not just OpenAI operating in a silo, right?
No.
The report highlights multi-agent systems, too.
Mm-hmm.
This is where you have multiple AI models acting as different specialists, like a virtual radiologist talking to a virtual oncologist.
Yeah, those are fascinating.
Microsoft's AI Diagnostic Orchestrator, paired with OpenAI's O3 model, was tested on similar NEJM cases.
Yeah.
And it completely crushed it, 85.5% accuracy. And the practicing human physicians, doctors with like 5 to 20 years of experience, they hit about 20% accuracy in those same challenging cases.
What's fascinating here is what those numbers actually represent, and more importantly, what they fundamentally hide from a QA perspective.
Right.
Because when you see an 85.5% accuracy rate against a 20% human baseline, the immediate, completely natural instinct is to say, well, the machines are superior. Replace the humans immediately.
Of course. I mean, if a human doctor is wrong 80% of the time on these incredibly hard cases and the AI is right 85% of the time, it almost seems like clinical malpractice not to use the AI.
But as a quality assurance auditor, you cannot just look at the final score. You have to interrogate the testing environment. You have to ask, under what exact conditions was this 85.5% achieved?
And the answer is?
The answer is, these are exam-style validations. The clinical vignettes from the New England Journal of Medicine, they are incredibly difficult, yes, but they are also completely mathematically perfect.
Perfect in what way? Because the diseases themselves are chaotic, right?
The diseases are, but the text is perfect. The data is pre-cleaned. Think back to the vignette you just read. It's neatly packaged into a cohesive grammatical narrative. Every symptom listed is relevant, or at least strategically placed as a deliberate red herring by the author.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, the lab values are presented clearly and in standard units. The patient's history is chronicled with perfect chronological clarity. The AI is reading a highly structured text document. It has been stripped of all real-world physical noise.
Okay, let's unpack this. This feels like someone taking a written driving test.
That's a good way to put it.
You sit in a quiet room, you have a multiple choice paper in front of you, and the paper asks, what do you do at a four-way stop when another car arrives at the same time? You recall the exact paragraph from the driver's manual, you select option C, and you answer perfectly. You score 100%.
Right.
You have completely mastered the rules of the road.
Yes.
But passing that written test in a quiet room does not mean you are ready to be dropped behind the wheel of a manual transmission truck in rush hour traffic in the middle of a blinding blizzard with a screaming toddler in the back seat kicking your seat.
Precisely. The written test is the New England Journal of Medicine vignette. The blizzard with the screaming toddler is a Tuesday night in the emergency department.
Wow.
What these high scores prove is that the models have absolutely mastered medical literature. But mastering medical literature is not the same thing as mastering medical practice.
Okay, but I'm going to push back on you here, and I'm going to push back hard. I'm putting on the hat of an optimistic tech developer or maybe a hospital administrator looking at the budget.
Fair enough.
If these models are crushing the benchmarks by such a ridiculously wide margin, I mean, 86% compared to 34%? Doesn't that raw cognitive power count for something? I mean, a 50-point gap. Isn't it just a matter of time, maybe a year or two, before that massive lead in the written test translates to the clinic? How can a cognitive engine that powerful be derailed by just a little bit of real-world messiness?
Well, that is the exact argument the developers make, and it's why understanding the underlying mechanism of these models is so critical for an auditor. You ask why raw cognitive power gets derailed by messiness. We have to look at how large language models, or LLMs, actually think.
Okay.
They use something called attention mechanisms. They assign mathematical weight to different words or tokens in a sequence. So in a perfect NEJM paragraph, the attention mechanism expertly links the word methotrexate in sentence 2 with the word dyspnea in sentence 1, and it surfaces the concept of drug-induced pneumonitis.
Right. It connects the dots perfectly because the dots are perfectly laid out.
Exactly. But in a real hospital, a patient doesn't present as a neat paragraph. A patient presents with vague abdominal pain. They might be a poor historian, meaning they, forget to mention they're taking herbal supplements that are interacting with their medication.
Oh, happens all the time.
Right. Or the lab machine on the 4th floor is down for maintenance, so you are entirely missing a critical blood value. The previous doctor's notes in the computer system are a garbled mess of copy-pasted abbreviations, typos, and incomplete sentences.
What noise?
The noise. When you inject that level of unstructured, contradictory noise into an LLM, the attention mechanism fractures. It starts assigning high mathematical weight to irrelevant typos or false patient statements, and it drops the critical, subtle clues.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, the raw cognitive power of the AI is currently fundamentally dependent on a perfect data input stream. When the input stream gets messy, the reasoning engine doesn't just slow down, it stalls completely. Or worse, it confidently hallucinates a completely wrong path.
So the test itself, these benchmark exams, isn't broken for what it measures. It accurately measures text-based reasoning on curated, perfect data. But the translation to the clinic is where the QA failure occurs.
Exactly.
Which immediately brings up the core constraint of our audit today. If we know that the real world is a blizzard, and we know that the AI fails in the blizzard, how is the industry currently validating these models? What data are they actually using to prove these tools are safe before they're deployed into hospitals?
And that question just blows the lid off what the Stanford Harvard Arise Network uncovered. They published the State of Clinical AI report in January 2026, and they did exactly what a good QA auditing team would do.
Which is?
They didn't just look at the marketing brochures, they looked at the validation pipelines. They systematically reviewed over 500 recent clinical AI studies.
Over 500 studies. That is a massive sample size. That represents basically the bulk of the current cutting-edge research landscape.
It does. And the numbers they found are, well, they're the bomb drop of this entire deep dive. Out of those 500-plus clinical AI studies, nearly 50% relied solely on simulated exam-style questions.
Let me just repeat that so it really sinks in.
Yeah.
Half of the entire field of medical AI research is evaluating their clinical tools using the board game operation.
Yeah.
They're taking complex algorithms that they want to put in hospitals, and they are testing them exclusively by asking them multiple choice questions.
Exactly. But it actually gets worse, much worse. Out of all the evaluated models in that massive 500-study review, what percentage do you think utilized actual real-world clinical patient data? Not pristine textbook cases. Real, messy, fractured hospital data.
Oh, man. Given the buildup.
10%.
Only 5%.
5%.
Just 5%. For you listening, I really want you to stop and let that sink in. 95% of the clinical AI studies happening right now, the exact studies driving the massive hype cycles, the studies driving billions in venture capital investment, the studies driving the narrative that AI is ready to take over the hospital is about, they are not using real patient data to validate their performance.
It's terrifying. And from a strict quality assurance standpoint, we use a very specific term for this. It's called a lack of environment parity.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Unpack environment parity for us. What does that look like in traditional engineering?
Sure. So in traditional software engineering, if you're building an application, say a banking app, your test environment must perfectly mirror your production environment.
Right, obviously.
If you test your code on a sterile local server running Windows, but you deploy it to a live global cloud server running Linux with millions of concurrent users, you have a catastrophic lack of environment parity. The code will inevitably break when it hits production because the underlying conditions are completely different.
And in medicine, Production means the hospital floor.
Exactly. Production in medicine means the electronic health record, the EHR.
Oh, the EHR. Let's talk about the EHR for a second, because I think a lot of people outside of medicine think patient files are these beautiful, clean digital dossiers.
Oh no. The reality of the EHR is a nightmare of data fragmentation. Production data means dealing with notes that a stressed resident hastily typed at 3:00 a.m. after a 24-hour shift.
With probably a dozen typos.
Easily. It means dealing with interoperability failures where a patient's lab results from an outside clinic are scanned in as a blurry PDF rather than imported as readable text data. It means patients who lie out of embarrassment about their smoking or drinking habits.
Right.
It means non-textbook symptom presentations where a heart attack doesn't present as chest pain, but as isolated jaw pain and nausea.
So if 95% of studies are not using that real messy EHR data, the medical AI field is violating the absolute most basic rule of software quality assurance. We are facing a massive synthetic validation crisis. The AI is being built, tuned, and validated in a total vacuum.
It is a vacuum. And to understand why this is happening, we have to look at how they are getting this 95% synthetic data. Because they aren't just using old NEJM articles anymore. They need millions of data points to train these huge models.
So where does it come from? Are they writing it by hand?
No, that would take too long. They are increasingly using other large language models to generate it. They use a model like GPT-4 to write thousands of fake simulated patient histories. They prompt the AI to, generate a patient with these 5 symptoms.
Wait. You were telling me that they are grading in AI's ability to diagnose a patient by having it read a fake story about a patient that was written by another AI?
Yes. They are creating a closed-loop echo chamber of synthetic validation. The AI is learning to diagnose the perfectly structured hallucinations of its peer.
Okay, think about how absurd this would be in literally any other safety-critical industry. Let's use an aerospace analogy. Imagine Boeing, or Airbus, is building a brand new, highly advanced aircraft autopilot system. But instead of putting it in a real plane and flying it in the actual sky, they test it exclusively in a desktop flight simulator.
Right.
And to make it even crazier, the engineers forgot to program wind into the simulator's code.
Yeah, no wind, no rain, no thermal updrafts, no unpredictable turbulence, just a perfect, frictionless mathematical vacuum.
Exactly. And the autopilot scores 100%. It lands the simulated plane perfectly on the simulated runway every single time. The engineers throw a huge party and declare it the safest autopilot in history.
Because in the simulation it is.
Right. But as a QA auditor, if I walked into Boeing and saw that a safety-critical software update was validated on 95% synthetic windless data, I'd fail it immediately. I would ground the entire fleet before it ever took off, because the second that plane hits real weather, it's going to fall out of the sky.
The analogy is perfectly apt. The medical field is building an autopilot that doesn't know what wind is.
So my pushback here, my fundamental question to you and to the medical field is, why on earth are they accepting this? Why is a 5% reality rate tolerated when human lives are the end product? Why don't they just use the real data?
Well, it's tolerated primarily because of the immense, almost insurmountable difficulty and expense of accessing real longitudinal patient data.
Walk us through those roadblocks, because to the layman, it seems like, there are millions of patients. Just grab the data.
First and foremost, real clinical data is heavily protected by privacy laws, primarily IPPA in the United States and GDPR in Europe. You cannot just scrape a hospital's hard drive and feed it into an open-source AI model.
Oh, obviously. That'd be a massive lawsuit.
Huge. The data has to be painstakingly de-identified. Every name, date, address, and identifying detail must be scrubbed, which is incredibly difficult with free text doctor's notes where a doctor might randomly write, "Patient works at the Starbucks on 5th Avenue."
So the de-identification process itself requires immense manual labor.
Massive labor. Secondly, the data is heavily siloed in proprietary, entirely incompatible hospital computer systems. Epic doesn't easily talk to Cerner. The data formats are a mess. Cleaning it, standardizing it, and making it machine-readable costs millions of dollars and takes years.
I see.
Conversely, synthetic data and multiple-choice exams are cheap. They are endlessly, instantly scalable. And most importantly for the developers, they yield beautiful PR-friendly metrics like 86% accuracy.
It looks great on a pitch deck for investors.
Exactly. The entire industry is taking the path of least resistance because the barrier to entry for true environment parity, getting your hands on clean, real-world data, is punishingly high.
But taking the path of least resistance when you're building a medical diagnostic tool is a catastrophic compliance nightmare. Which begs an immediate, very serious question for our audit.
Which is,
If the validation data is this detached from reality, if we're living in a 95% synthetic, windless bubble, how are these tools legally making it into the hands of doctors? Why hasn't a regulator stepped in and slammed the brakes?
and answering that question requires us to look directly at the gatekeepers. We have to look at the regulatory frameworks. According to the FDA device authorization data compiled in the 2026 report, there is an absolute explosion of approvals happening right now.
How many are we talking about?
There are currently 1,357 AI and machine learning-enabled medical devices authorized for use across 17 different clinical specialties.
1,357 devices. And the acceleration of this is wild. The report notes that 258 of those were authorized in the year 2025 alone. They aren't trickling in, they are flooding the market. So how are they getting through the FDA's gates if the data backing them is predominantly synthetic?
They are getting through because of the specific regulatory pathway being utilized by developers. The vast overwhelming majority of these AI tools are cleared through what is known as the FDA's 510K pathway.
Okay, as an auditor, I need to know the history of this. What is the 510K pathway, and why was it created?
Well, the 510K pathway was established way back in 1976 as part of the Medical Device Amendments. It was originally designed for physical, iterative medical devices, things like new surgical scalpels, hospital beds, or standard stethoscopes.
Simple, physical tools.
Exactly. The logic of 510K is that to get clearance to sell your new device, you, as the manufacturer, do not necessarily have to conduct massive, multi-year, highly expensive, randomized clinical trials. You don't have to prove from scratch that your scalpel is safe.
Because it's just a knife.
Right. You simply have to demonstrate to the FDA that your new device is substantially equivalent to a predicate device that is already legally on the market. Substantially equivalent. Okay. So if I manufacture a new surgical scalpel, I don't need to test it on 1,000 patients. I just bring it to the FDA and say, hey, look at this. It cuts exactly like the old scalpel. It's made of the exact same medical grade stainless steel. The handle is just slightly more ergonomic. It is substantially equivalent.
Yeah.
That makes total logical sense for a piece of metal.
Right. It prevents bureaucratic log jams for basic improvements. But now, apply that 1976 logic to an evolving multi-billion parameter neural network in 2026.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Developers are using the 510K pathway to clear complex AI algorithms by claiming they are substantially equivalent to older algorithms.
Wait, how does that work in practice?
Well, Developer A points to Developer B's algorithm from 2024 as their predicate, but Developer B's algorithm was cleared because it was substantially equivalent to Developer C's algorithm from 2021. It creates a daisy chain of equivalence that gets further and further away from actual rigorous clinical proof with every single link. And the data proves this lack of rigor. The 2026 report highlights a peer-reviewed analysis that looked at over 1,000 of these AI device authorizations. They dug into the actual evidence backing these tools, and they found a statistic that is almost hard to believe. Out of all the AI devices with clinical studies submitted, only 2.4% were supported by randomized controlled trial data.
2.4%.
Let me just pause here. We are talking about the gold standard of medical evidence, the randomized controlled trial, the RCT. This is how we prove that a new cancer drug actually works or that a new surgical technique is actually safer. You test it against a control group in the real world to eliminate bias and placebo effects. And the RCT is almost entirely absent for the AI device market. 97.6% of these tools are bypassing the highest standard of proof.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the conclusion we have to draw as auditors is that the current regulatory framework is fundamentally optimizing for innovation speed rather than rigorous, upfront clinical evidence.
Okay, let's unpack this substantial equivalent idea a bit more because my auditor alarms are deafening right now. I'm going to use another analogy. Using the 510K pathway for a neural network is like a tech company trying to grandfather in a fully autonomous, AI-driven, self-driving car because it has 4 rubber wheels, a metal chassis, and a steering wheel, just like a 1908 Model T Ford.
I love that. Yes.
The company goes to the regulator and says, hey, look, it's substantially equivalent to a Model T. It rolls on the road just the same. But that completely and utterly misses the cognitive engine running the machine. The steering wheel isn't the risk. The rubber tires aren't the risk. The billion-parameter neural network making split-second decisions about pedestrians is the risk. You cannot claim substantial equivalence on cognition.
No, you can't. It is a profound mismatch between technology and regulation. And, to be fair, the regulatory bodies are acutely aware of this friction. They know that a pathway built for scalpels in 1976 is failing to capture the risk of generative AI. So they are trying to adapt. They're increasingly relying heavily on post-market monitoring.
What does that look like?
They are using something called predetermined change control plans, or PCCPs. The report notes these were used in about 10% of the 2025 clearances. Essentially, the FDA looks at an algorithm and says, we know this AI is going to learn and update itself, so we will let you onto the market based on substantial equivalence, but you have to give us a detailed plan of exactly how your algorithm will change over time, and we will monitor your performance after you are deployed in the real world.
So they're shifting the quality assurance burden from pre-market testing to post-market surveillance.
Precisely.
But I have to push back on the regulators here. I mean, are we honestly sacrificing safety-critical software quality assurance just to keep up with the tech sector's frenetic release cycle? In the tech world, in Silicon Valley, the guiding mantra for the last 2 decades has been move fast and break things.
Right, the agile development model.
Yes, agile development. You release beta software to the public, you let the users find the bugs, it crashes a few times, and then you patch it in version 2.0. But you absolutely cannot beta test a diagnostic algorithm on a live patient in the intensive care unit. If an app crashes, I lose my high score. If an AI misses a sepsis diagnosis during a post-market surveillance period, a patient goes into septic shock and dies.
Exactly.
If the regulatory bar allows 97.6% of these models to bypass randomized trials, the burden of ensuring safety in production doesn't fall on the developer, and it doesn't fall on the FDA. It falls squarely on the hospitals, the nurses, and the doctors who are actually using the tool.
Which is an incredibly heavy, unfair burden to place on an already strained healthcare system.
Yeah.
And this brings us to the most critical part of our audit today. We need to look at what actually happens when these tools hit the floor. We need to examine diagnostic reliability and production utility. We know the training data is mostly synthetic. We know the regulatory barrier is low. So what happens when these largely unvalidated exam-trained models finally meet the chaotic, messy, real-world complexities of a hospital?
Let's talk about the specific harms. Because the 2026 Stanford report details the findings of the no-harm benchmark. This was an evaluation specifically and purposefully looking for dangerous outputs when general-purpose AI models are asked to perform clinical reasoning without strict, hard-coded guardrails.
The no-harm benchmark is essential reading for any auditor, and the findings are stark. The large language models they tested produced between 11.8 and 14.6 severely harmful recommendations per 100 clinical cases.
Over 10% of the time, let's frame that. In more than 1 out of every 10 patients, the model is confidently suggesting a course of action that could severely injure or actively kill the patient.
But it isn't just the frequency of the errors that keeps QA auditors awake at night, it is the nature of those errors. Crucially, the benchmark found that 76.6% of those severe harms were errors of omission.
Errors of omission. This is a massive point. Explain the difference between an error of commission and an error of omission in this context.
An error of commission is an active, visible mistake. It's the AI explicitly telling the doctor, give this patient 500 milligrams of penicillin, when the patient's chart clearly states they have a severe anaphylactic penicillin allergy.
That's a glaring error.
Right. A human doctor looking at that recommendation will immediately spot it, flag it, and say, whoa, no, the machine is wrong.
Because it's visible. It's literally on the screen.
Exactly. But an error of omission is entirely different. It means the AI simply failed to recommend a critical, life-saving test or intervention that was desperately needed. It didn't suggest the wrong drug, it just forgot to suggest the right one.
Do you have an example?
Yeah. For example, a patient comes in with symptoms of a mild infection, but their lab work shows a dangerously, lethally low potassium level. The AI correctly diagnoses the infection, suggests the right antibiotic, and writes a beautiful summary note. But it completely fails to notice or mention the potassium level. It omits the critical electrolyte replacement therapy.
Oh, wow. And if we look at the Medigent bench evaluation, which is another study highlighted in the report that tests these LLM agents in a virtual electronic health record environment, actively trying to simulate that messy production space, the very best model only achieved a task success rate of 69.7%. It failed roughly 30% of the time to successfully navigate the virtual EHR and complete the clinical task.
It just gets lost in the noise.
But as auditors, we also have to be objective. It's not all doom and gloom in the production environment. There are tools that are working. We have to contrast this autonomous reasoning failure with the tools that do have proven production utility. The Stanford report specifically notes that AI performs incredibly well when it is deployed to support rather than replace clinician judgment.
Yes, the constrained workflow tools. These are the actual tangible success stories of 2025 and 2026. The report highlights ambient AI scribes as a massive win.
What exactly is an ambient AI scribe?
It's an AI tool, usually running on a smartphone or a microphone in the exam room, that passively listens to the natural conversation between a doctor and a patient. It listens to the entire 15-minute encounter, understands the medical context, and automatically drafts the highly structured, standardized clinical note for the electronic health record.
That sounds super useful.
Oh, it is. Health systems are reporting that these tools are saving physicians up to 83% of their note-writing effort. It is drastically reducing physician burnout, which is a massive crisis in its own right.
And it isn't just taking notes. There are clinical tools working too. The report points to the TreeWS sepsis prediction system. Sepsis, for those who might not know, is a life-threatening response to infection that moves incredibly fast. Early detection is everything. The report notes that the TreeWS system reduced sepsis mortality by 18.7% across the deployed hospitals. That is thousands of lives saved.
So as auditors, we have to look at the data and ask the fundamental question, why? Why do the ambient scribes and the sepsis alerts work so incredibly well, saving time and saving lives, while the autonomous diagnostic models generate severe harms 10% of the time and get lost in the EHR?
So what does this all mean? The answer goes right back to the core of our audit: environment parity and constraints. The sepsis models and the ambient scribes were built, trained, rigorously tested, and validated on actual, messy, unstructured hospital data. They don't live in a synthetic vacuum. They live in the production environment. They know what the wind feels like.
And perhaps more importantly, they are tightly, rigidly constrained in what they are allowed to do. They do not make autonomous medical decisions. An ambient scribe doesn't prescribe medication. It simply drafts a text note for a human to review and sign. A sepsis prediction system doesn't automatically order antibiotics. It flashes an alert on a screen for a human nurse or doctor to investigate. They rely entirely and completely on human clinician oversight to finalize the action.
I think this requires another analogy to really drive the point home. Comparing an ambient AI scribe or a sepsis alert to an autonomous diagnostic AI. It's exactly like comparing your word processor's spell check to an AI trying to write a novel from scratch.
Oh, I like that. Walk me through it.
Think about spell check. Spell check is a highly effective, rigidly constrained assistant. It understands the rules of spelling and basic grammar. It scans your document. It highlights a typo in red, and it waits. It relies on you.
Yeah.
You look at the red line, you use your human judgment to decide if the suggestion makes sense in context, and you click accept or ignore. It makes you a faster, more accurate writer.
Because of constraint.
Exactly. But asking a general-purpose LLM to autonomously diagnose a complex multi-systemic patient in the ICU based solely on its multiple-choice exam training. That is like asking your spell checker to write a Pulitzer Prize-winning 600-page historical biography. It's using the wrong tool for the job. The spell checker doesn't understand narrative arc or character development or historical context. It just knows how words are spelled. The diagnostic LLM doesn't understand the physical reality of a crashing patient. It just knows how medical tokens mathematically relate to one another in a vacuum.
And that analogy ties perfectly back to the terrifying danger of errors of omission that we saw in the no-harm benchmark. Errors of omission are the absolute most dangerous bugs in quality assurance because they are invisible. Let's stick with your writing analogy. If a spell checker changes the word definite to defiant, that's an error of commission. You see the wrong word, you fix it. But what if the spell checker, acting autonomously, just quietly deleted an entire crucial paragraph of your book without telling you?
You would never know it was gone unless you reread the entire manuscript line by line.
Exactly. And in medicine, if a system confidently tells a doctor, I've reviewed the chart, everything looks fine, diagnosis is a mild cold, no further action needed, the doctor is highly susceptible to a well-documented psychological phenomenon called automation bias.
Automation bias. The tendency to blandly trust the machine. We see this in aviation all the time, pilots trusting instruments over their own eyes.
Yes. The doctor is tired, they have 20 other patients to see, the machine sounds incredibly confident, and there are no red flags on the screen. So they trust the machine, and they move on. The system's silence, its failure to mention the lethal potassium level, leads directly to fatal diagnostic delays.
Which brings up a massive fundamental pushback on this whole concept of human in the loop. The AI industry loves to use that phrase as a shield. Whenever they are confronted with these error rates, they say, don't worry, the AI isn't acting alone. A doctor is always in the loop. A human is always overseeing the AI.
Oh, it's the ultimate liability deflection.
It is. But think about the reality of what we just discussed. If 76% of the severe harms generated by these models are the AI simply forgetting to order a critical test or omitting a vital differential, how can a doctor possibly oversee a system when the danger is what the system doesn't say? You can review a drafted scribe note to see if a specific word is wrong. That takes seconds. You cannot easily review an AI's invisible thought process to see what obscure disease it forgot to consider. To do that, the doctor has to redo the entire cognitive process from scratch.
Which completely negates the point of having the AI in the first place.
Exactly. Babysitting an AI that constantly omits critical information isn't a time saver. It is cognitively exhausting, it introduces automation bias, and ultimately, it is profoundly unsafe.
It creates a dangerous false sense of security. The QA conclusion here is inescapable. Autonomous or even semi-autonomous clinical reasoning by general-purpose AI is simply not ready for the production environment, regardless of how spectacularly high it scores on multiple-choice written exams.
Okay, let's take a breath. Let's drop the strict auditor personas for a moment and bring this all home for the listener. Let's synthesize what we've actually discovered in this deep dive into the 2026 Stanford AI Index Medicine chapter and the ARISE network data.
The contrast is the story. On the surface, the exam performance of AI is nothing short of jaw-dropping. We're looking at machines beating seasoned human doctors 86% to 34% on the most complex, grueling medical reasoning tests ever devised.
But underneath that shiny surface, the fundamental software quality assurance is terrifying. We have an entire field where over 500 studies reveal that only 5% of models are being validated on real, messy clinical data. 95% of the industry is caught in a massive simulation trap, optimizing their models for pristine, synthetic, windless environments.
We have regulatory pathways originally designed for 1970s surgical scalpels that are currently grandfathering in highly complex neural networks, allowing 97.6% of them to bypass the gold standard randomized controlled trials. They are pushing the burden of testing onto the hospital floor.
And as a direct result of all of this, clinical AI currently only truly works and is only truly safe when it is tightly constrained to specific mechanical tasks, like drafting notes as an ambient scribe or spotting specific data trends for sepsis, and when it is heavily babysat by human experts. The autonomous diagnostic engine is a mirage.
The translation from the pristine lab to the chaotic bedside is fundamentally stalled by a complete lack of environment parity.
So, for you, listening to this right now, the next time you're scrolling through your feed and you see a breathless, viral headline about an AI passing the medical boards or outperforming top doctors on a diagnostic test, I want you to channel your inner QA auditor. I want you to look past the hype of the high score. Ask yourself the fundamental compliance question. Did this AI pass a written exam in a quiet room, or did it actually cure a complex patient in a real chaotic hospital? Because right now, based on the data, those are two very, very different things.
This raises an important question, though. A thought to leave you with, straight from the data in the Stanford report. While the medical industry is struggling so profoundly to validate AI inside the guarded, highly regulated professional walls of a hospital, that same AI technology is already out in the wild.
What do you mean, out in the wild where?
The report highlights a truly chilling fact about patient engagement and consumer behavior. Google AI overviews, those AI-generated text summaries that now appear at the very top of your search results before you even see a link.
Right, the ones that try to just answer your question immediately.
Exactly. The Stanford report notes that those AI overviews now appear at the top of 84% to 92% of all health-related searches. If you pull out your phone right now and type in a query about a symptom you are having, an AI overview triggers and attempts to diagnose or advise you 92% of the time. So I really want you to think about the logical conclusion of this audit. If the most rigorous, heavily funded, carefully monitored clinical AI tools in the world are currently struggling with a 95% synthetic validation crisis when trying to help highly trained doctors inside a controlled hospital environment, what kind of quality assurance testing do you think is happening on the unconstrained, consumer-facing AI that is currently diagnosing you and your family directly through your web browser every single day?
Who is auditing that?
Exactly. Who is auditing that?
That is a terrifying thought to end on. But it is exactly why we do these deep dives. We have to look past the shiny veneer. Thank you so much for joining us, for putting on the auditor's hat today, and for exploring the vast, murky, and often dangerous gap between simulated intelligence and real-world medicine. Until next time, keep asking the hard questions.